Hi, everybody. This is an event with the Footsteps Festival, which is a festival celebrating the effective self-management of chronic pain. The festival was conceived by a group of people who got together on Twitter, and it's a true co-production with people who have lived experience of pain, those that care for them, healthcare professionals, and academics. We are very lucky to be supported by the Live Well with Pain website and the Physiotherapy Pain Association, both of whom have great resources, and I highly recommend them. All the links that we have in chat will be sent to you in an email with the recording link after this thing. So today we're delighted to be joined by the pain coach, Richmond Stace, for a question and answer session on moving forward with chronic pain. I'll let Richmond introduce himself in a second. I'm Niki Jones and part of the Footsteps Festival team, and I've lived experience of pretty disabling persistent pain for the last 20 years. But in the last 5 years, I've used effective self-management to essentially recover. But that recovery and my life looks now very different to how I once imagined it, but it's very good. Also with us is Louise Trewern, our chair, and she also has lived experience of pain and effective self-management. And both of us have come off high-dose opioids. So with no further ado, Richmond, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Niki. That's great. Hello, everyone. Great to see you in this sort of modern thing that we do now, where you can all meet like this from all over the world, which is really cool. So as Niki said, this is a Q&A session. We came up with this idea a few weeks ago and thought it might be cool, so that you can just sort of come along and fire your questions at me, and I'll try and answer them as best I can. Just in case you don't know who I am, I'm Richmond Stace, and I've been working in chronic pain for many years. I've got quite a mixed background. I started off as a nurse, sports science, rehabilitation, physiotherapy. I've got a master's in pain science, coaching, all sorts of psychological things. So there's a big bag of qualifications, if you want to call them that, and badges that I've got. But I mean, that's not important. What's important really is to sort of bring that all together to try and be useful and helpful for people who are suffering. So that's really my purpose. So what we'll do is I was going to talk a little bit about pain, but what I thought we might do, let's see how we go with this, is Niki's face. It's like I'm going to talk about something completely different. Is actually to chuck out a question to you. Now, it's always a bit weird because I'm just here in a room myself, and I'll look, but I've got the chat here, so I can see what you're saying. And then we'll kind of build it from that. So just spend a few minutes playing with this particular question, which is always a really interesting one. And I do this with clinicians as well. And then you can start to think about your questions. Hopefully you've brought a few, and we'll kind of put them together, and then I'll try and answer them in I'm going to say in a Nick Cave kind of way. I don't know if anyone reads the Red Hand Files by Nick Cave. Nick Cave. Anyway, what he does, just in case you haven't read them, and they're brilliant to read, nothing to do with pain or anything, but people send in questions, and he gathers 2 or 3, and then he kind of really cleverly entwines his answer. Now, I'm nowhere near as bright in that way as him, so it'd probably be a rubbish attempt, but I thought it might be a good way of doing it. So anyway, we'll put the Red Hand link in, so you can check that out as well, just if you happen to like really good kind of writing and question answering. So here's my question to you, and let's see what comes up. We've got how many people? We've got 37 people in the room, which is cool. So let's see what comes of this question. You ready? What is pain? Let's see what appears. Debilitating. Yeah, nice. Whatever I say it is. You can swear if you want. I think. I mean, I don't mind. Are we allowed to swear? Is this a plus 18?
We can swear, it's within reason.
So you're probably all seeing these answers. And the thing that always stands out, and every time I do this, keep putting them in there, keep putting them in there, is the uniqueness of the answers. They're all completely different, aren't they? Different language, different words, different perspectives, different positions.
Do you want to read some of them out for the video? Or...
Yeah, they're going by pretty quick. But hopefully people are reading them. So, but just in case you're not, I'll just whiz through. So, an experienced sensation, sometimes pretty awful. The monster that squats on top of my life, overwhelming, everything and nothing, mental, physical, a physical sensation that debilitates. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. An unpleasant sensation, a gift from my brain. Oh yeah, someone's read The Gift Nobody Wants, Paul Brand. He's written some interesting stuff, hasn't he? His work in leprosy. I must be Superman by now. Pain is a protector. A biomechanical survival mechanism. That's just number 1 from Fern. Maybe there's number 2. Okay, so yeah, it's all very, very different, isn't it? And that illustrates a really key point, actually, the fact that we all have unique brains, unique past experiences, and the modern, or one of the sort of modern models that's being used at the moment to really investigate pain as both a lived experience, but also something that we're trying to understand scientifically is called predictive processing. And some of you may have heard of that, or predictive coding. And what it speaks of is a brain, although the work now is going much further beyond the brain, because we have to, because you're not just a brain, you're a whole person. And the idea of cognition or thinking, again, most people traditionally would think, well, it's a brain mindy kind of thing, is actually going well beyond that as well. So, you know, cognition can be thought of as a whole person, and working right the way through all the body systems, you know, down to a cellular level, and how the information is being processed back and forth, but in a predictive kind of way. So in other words, the brain is not sat up here just kind of waiting for stuff to come in, information to come in, and then to create, boom, the world. It's actually predicting what the world is like, predicting you, if you like, into existence, and what it's like to be you, and then updating that if things don't actually turn out to be quite that way. Now the beauty of this model is, and it's not proven yet, and I want to make a point here. There is a lot of information out there about pain, and it's hard because you as the individual got to kind of curate, you know, what has meaning, what's right, what's accurate. And you will see messages of real certainty about certain things. This is the model, this is the way, this is the approach. You know, we've done a study with 50 people. But the reality, and some of the work is very good, and the stats very good as well. But if you haven't been one of those people in that study, then is that model applicable to you? So they're models, they're not proven, they're really useful, and we need them, and theories and ideas, we need them, but we need to see the bigger picture here. And certainly, and some of you have probably discovered this, unfortunately, that there is no one way. And as soon as someone's saying, well, this is the model, or this is the number of steps you must take, or this is the approach, or whatever, then essentially you're being squeezed through a hole, as opposed to the other way around. In other words, who are you? What's your experience? What are the needs in your life? What do you want to be doing? Right. How can we help you? And how can we draw on this huge amount of range of resources and skills and techniques and practice? I mean, there's loads of things, loads and loads of things. The toolbox is enormous. And it needs to be, imagine if you you wanted to have some building work done at your house, and you, I don't know, maybe you wanted to build an extension to your house or to where you live, and you call a builder around, and they turn up with a screwdriver, and you say, all right, how's that screwdriver going to help build the extension? I don't know, is that a good example? I don't know, it just kind of came to me. But the point is that we need, as the clinicians or therapists helping, we need a whole range of different things to offer, because we got to match it to you, not the other way around. And I make that point because I know that increasingly we're seeing predictive processing being spoken about, and that's great. I spend time with some of the academics, going to fairly small niche meetings about this stuff. And when you listen to them speaking with real humility and where we actually are with this, you realize that, yes, a lot of progress has been made, but there is a hell of a lot we don't know. So when you then go out into the popular press and you're reading about how this model, you're like, no, you're taking that and you're running with it in the wrong way. It's giving the wrong, we're not there yet. So I think that PP is probably the best model that we've had so far. I don't think I'm alone in thinking that, but it's not wholly proven yet. There's a lot more work to be done. I'll share, we'll share some links and resources so you can read a bit about this stuff. Obviously it varies in complexity because, we got some of the brightest people working with this model. And some of the papers are just immensely complex. Unless you're particularly scientifically minded, I find some of it gobbledygook. I can't make head nor tail of it. You have to pick and choose what works, and then ask questions to find out a bit more about it. But I'll share some stuff around that. But hopefully that makes sense. But it is hard to be your own curator of information on that basis. So where do you go? Well, the Footsteps guys and the associated, they're providing really good quality information, and I try and do the same thing. I try and curate the high quality stuff and put it out on the social media channels and such like. But equally, I'm aware that I'm just another voice kind of out there. There's lots of people claiming different things. So anyway, hopefully that's something practical for you to consider, because I want you to be able to go away from this with some practical ways of thinking about stuff. But coming back to the PP model, having said all that, it's instead of the brain being sat there and sense data coming in and then this sort of experience being generated, it's thought that instead that the brain is actively generating our experiences of the world and ourselves. And that's why it's so unique. We can look at the same tree, we could agree that it's a tree, but we never really know what the other person is seeing, the colors of which, the shape of which, or whatever. So that's important for us all to think about. So each pain experience is utterly unique, and each pain experience in each moment is utterly unique. So you might have an experience of pain right now. You might be feeling something right now, and someone might say, well, how does that feel? And you might say, it's the same. It's the same as it was a few minutes ago, yesterday, last week, 3 years ago, whatever. So it's a very common way that people answer until they start exploring their own experiences a little bit more. And this, because actually explaining pain is not the hard bit. The hard bit is for us to realize some of the realities of life and how we perceive and how experiences are generated. And the reason why that's hard is because our experiences turn up the way they do. It sort of feels like there's a little me behind my eyes kind of looking out. And it really feels like the world is just it's just there. It doesn't feel like the world is being generated, or the sense of me is being, as in my body, is being generated. It doesn't feel like that because it's just here. I mean, that's one of the remarkable things, isn't it? The fact that we don't have to do anything to have any kind of experience. It's just there. Dunk. But because of that, it makes it hard to kind of get our heads around what is thought to be happening. And that is that we don't have a direct experience of the world or ourselves. We have one that's just being generated as a best guess. Just pause at that moment, because I mean, some of you may have heard that before, but if you think about it, if the brain is involved with, and I know I keep going back to brain, and I said before that it's more than a brain, so just bear that in mind. I'm just doing that for convenience, really. If we're saying that the brain is partly responsible for generating all of the experiences we have, you hearing my voice, feelings, smells, what you can see, what you can feel in terms of emotional states, your thoughts, you know, they're all being generated. But they're being generated, as I say, in part because you have a brain, but also because you have a body in a particular state, which is ever changing, ever changing. You know, no moment is ever the same. One of the greatest insights is impermanence. And essentially impermanence comes from Buddhism. And what it speaks of is that each moment is fundamentally different. No moment, nothing can ever be the same. Coming back to that, when someone says, how are you? Or you say to someone, how are you? And they go, it's the same. Nothing can ever be the same. The word is the same. It's not same. But fundamentally, it can't be. And the problem with saying to ourselves or to others that everything's the same is it pushes us into a rather helpless state, because it's like, well, everything's the same. What can I do about that? Bugger all. And that's not the truth of it, because the truth of it is there's lots of things that we can do. So we want to try and get ourselves into more resourceful states where that becomes a bit more obvious, the opportunities in the environment. And as I'm sure most of you will appreciate, I'm sure, because I'm basing this mainly on what people tell me, is that in time, the range of opportunities in their life just kind of gets less and less and less and less in whatever environment it might be. And essentially the work is to get to a position where you can start opening that up again. Because undoubtedly, and again, listening to, the lived experience stories, what people have been able to do is to reposition their thinking on their pain and their life as a bigger picture, to really focus on what matters and then work out practical ways of achieving that. Now, it's not definite that you're going to achieve that, but what you're doing is you're shifting the probabilities in that direction. You're making it more likely. So I want to be able to go for a walk, just to enjoy the park or the woods or around a lake or whatever it might be. And that really matters to me. So, you're making it important. Okay, well, I can't do the whole thing, but what can I do? So you're very much focusing on what you want rather than what you don't want. And then you start to notice how the mind, and this is no person's fault, this is just the way we work as humans, all the reasons why you shouldn't do it kind of come in. That part of you pipes up. No, I can't do that. No chance. Or that'll hurt like hell afterwards. Or whatever. And again, no blame. This is a compassion-based approach. So there's no blame attached here at all. This is just how we work. When we get into these kinds of survival, protective, energy-saving modes in our body, which we feel as emotions and perhaps pain or tension, but also thought. So it all comes together. So we're tying everything together here as a whole. But the more we can feed or water the seeds of what we can do and keeping focused on what we can do and having practical ways of gradually doing it, then those sorts of things start to happen or can start to happen. You're pushing the probabilities that way. So if we focus on what we don't want, i.e. pain and all the things we can't do in our life, we are pretty much guaranteed to get that. And we're just using pain as an example. I mean, this is a life skill. This is the same in anything. We seem to be very good at focusing on what we don't want. So if I say to someone, right, what do you want to achieve? They might typically start by saying, well, I don't want this pain. So they're immediately telling me about the thing they don't want. but it's kind of the natural reaction. It's the kind of way that we respond. And often it's off the back of a whole load of, difficult situations and maybe treatments and things that haven't really worked out. You're certainly not where you want to be, that's for sure. So that becomes an understandable start point. I don't want this. I don't want this pain. But of course, then that's like saying, don't think of elephants. By trying not to think about the very thing, you end up thinking about the damn thing. So it's really trying to focus, and this is the practice, this is training. And this, in fact, is where something like meditation, mindfulness can be really helpful, because that is a practice which is all about starting to see more clearly, see things more as they are, rather than being pushed and pulled by emotions and preferences. Because whether we like it or not, life doesn't care about our preferences or what we want. It just turns up a particular way. Our job is to deal with it in the best way we can. And of course, that's much harder when you're experiencing lots of pain. And obviously, pain doesn't come without other things like tiredness or lack of sleep and stresses and strains and relationships and work and finances, all these other things as well. So it's not just like pain is this thing on its own. So, I mean, one more thing about the predictive processing is that, so essentially, whatever you're feeling right now is your body system's best guess to explain the possible causes of the sensory information coming in. Now, when that sensory information does come in, it either matches, in which case nothing else needs to be done, or it creates an error in the system, in which case there's a sort of a prompt to update the model. Or I suppose you could try and change the world, but that's a bit trickier traditionally. But that's the predictive model. Now we can feel errors as pain, as thirst, as hunger, as thoughts, as emotional kind of states. And that's all information. And there's good thought that information is really there to help us survive, which is the prerogative. Survival, procreation, they're the two main things, really. And our systems are geared up for those. If we have a rough ride as a consequence of that, life doesn't really care, because life's not about that. I don't mean to sound harsh. Doesn't mean I'm not saying I don't care. By the way, we do care because we're humans. But there's another aspect to this which is important, and this is the sort of the bit that is helping people to understand the situation, because a lot of people with chronic pain have had all the tests, investigations, into the whole gamut of stuff, and there's not necessarily anything anatomically or structurally or even pathologically that would explain this extent of suffering. So the amount of pain, the frequency, and all the other things going on. So that's, of course, the biomedical model, to look for these things, to say, oh, look, that's the cause of your pain. But that's not pain. You can't see pain. Pain is an experience that's being generated top down, just like hunger and thirst and other need states. So it falls into that category. So it's information. And now we've also got a lot of messages like, oh, well, if you've got chronic pain or neuropathic pain, it's this sort of maladaptive. This is just my opinion now, this bit. I don't believe, I mean, I'm happy to be disproven. And I go out regularly to try and be disproven by reading lots of different things. So I'm open to that. But right now, my take on it is that it's not maladaptive. Something's not gone wrong in you. You're not someone or something that needs to be fixed, like a car. There are reasons why this has happened, and and we've got stuck. So as human beings, there are things that we seem to get stuck with. So whilst this predictive model is very good on a day-to-day basis of generating experiences and updating and learning and that sort of thing, and actually, if you examine your life, even though it's usually not the way you want it, you are still doing and achieving some pretty amazing things, despite the fact that it might be damn difficult. And the fact that you're doing something and someone else is doing a similar kind of thing, but yet they don't have pain, makes what you're doing even more incredible. I think that bit's often missed, but I don't think that it's this sort of maladaptive thing going on biologically, because as you know, there are millions of people across the globe, millions and millions of people across the globe suffering chronic pain for a whole host of different reasons. If it was maladaptive, I mean, that's evolution really gone wrong, isn't it? I mean, that's a possibility, but I doubt it. I doubt it. And the other reason why I think that that's a problem as a line of thought, well, no, two reasons. One is because it can make the person feel there's something wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with you as a person, nothing wrong with you. You don't need fixing. You need perhaps help and guidance, a way forward to create some different and better conditions to update your biology, perhaps in a particular direction. And there's nothing specific about that either. So don't buy into these ideas of reprocessing, specific stuff. None of that's been proven. But it also can make you feel perhaps like you're at the mercy of some kind of external power. And again, it takes you away from the focus of the things that you can do. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. You can come at me with your questions shortly. But the other piece of the PP is simply that there's a weighing up going on here. So if you've had lots of episodes of pain in particular contexts, and there's always a context to your pain, and obviously that can widen as time goes on. So if it's been pain, and then now, in this moment, the only moment, there's something about this situation which is like a time before when you've had pain, then your body systems can weight towards prior experiences as a more reliable and better explanation for what's happening now than the context of. So this weighing up is really important, or precision weighting, towards priors or towards errors. And a sort of a more day-to-day example of that is your attention. So typically when you put your attention on something, it becomes bigger in your awareness. So think of pain, for example. If you're in a different state because you're engaged with, I don't know, something or someone you love, you're having a conversation, you're watching a funny film, you're feeling that sense of awe because there's an amazing bit of nature in front of you, whatever it is, enjoying that first sip of coffee in the morning. Oh, sorry, I thought the screen had gone down then. Something just flipped across me, sorry. Then you're in a different state. And if you're in a different state, your conditions are different, your biology is different, then you have a different experience. So when you're in pain, you can think of it, right, there's a particular set of conditions right now, which mean the only experience I could have is pain. Pain is the best explanation that my systems can come up with. And it's not necessarily a sign of damage or injury or pathology. And we know that well. And most of you probably know that. Well, hopefully you know that, but you know that now. It's much more about you. So yes, although there may have been an injury or something that triggered the pain initially, the further away you come from that, the less it's got anything to do with really the tissues. I mean, the tissues themselves, they're important. We need them to be nourished and healthy and moving. But the tissues themselves can't produce pain. They don't have the ability to. So joints, muscles, bones, nerves, tendons, ligaments, they can't produce pain. They don't have the ability. So where you feel the pain is not where it's being generated. The pain is real. You might have pain in your knee or your foot or wherever, but it's not being generated from that place. That's where you feel it. Now, the example I often give there is in the cinema. If you're in the cinema watching a film, the film is on the screen. That's where it's happening, but it's not being generated from there. So with pain, we have to go much wider. We have to be able to zoom out and think about the person, your life, past experiences, beliefs, expectations, all of the things that are shaping and weighing up, what is the best explanation. And then once the best explanation has been reached through these sort of deep hierarchies through your nervous system, your immune system, endocrine system, your gut, all of these different systems working, then an experience is always generated, whatever it happens to be, and that's the best guess. But it's not always reflective of what's actually happening in your body, which could be a whole load of not a lot. Well, obviously your heart's beating and things like that, but in terms of any kind of damage or injury, that kind of thing. All right. So that was my 2-minute explanation of pain that went on a bit longer. Sorry, it always does.
That's brilliant, Richmond. Thank you so much. Can I ask a question from what you said? So to me, predictive processing means that there's potential for change.
Oh God, yeah, definitely.
But also there's a sort of a link to that, and what you've just said is pain feels physical. It feels very much in our body. And how do you shift people, or how do people shift themselves from that physical feeling into the sort of belief and understanding that it's a wider issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's possibly at the heart of the challenge, to move your position to update it, because it does feel like that. You know, we feel it, and necessarily feel it in our body as well. You know, you can't feel it anywhere else. I can't feel it over there. I've got to feel it here. But if we can somehow, you know, in time and with practice, remember that this is an experience being generated to protect me, even though I might not need protecting in this moment. So creating that little bit of space, again, this is where meditation can be useful to develop the way that we relate to what's happening more skillfully. And this is really important, actually, because, you know, you mentioned change. I mean, change is happening all the time anyway. It's just kind of which direction am I going to go in by what I'm practicing day in, day out with my habits of thought and action, and they come together. You know, they're not separate. But this little bit of space, you know, another great insight, we mentioned impermanence, and another great insight is really that it's not what's happening that matters as much as how I relate to it. Because it's a bit of a harsh reality in a way, I think. But once you kind of get over that hump, it makes sense that if you're in pain right now, there's nothing you can do about it, because it's already happening. So it's like, you can hear my voice. There's nothing you can do about that, because you're hearing it. You could mute it if you want now, but you've already heard it. So it's not about what's happening. It's about, well, how am I going to relate to that? How am I going to position myself to it? Because how you relate to it determines what route you go down. And of course, you know, we have a lot of automatic reactions and responses. And so we might need to pause and to study those and examine those and work out, you know, what's working and what isn't. That's why I started off by asking people, and you might reflect on your initial answer, you know, what is pain? That reveals to you your position, you know, because some people said it's a gift, some people said it's hell. You know, they're very different positions. There's no right or wrong. That's your position. Right. If that's my position, is it true? Is it accurate? Is it helpful? Is it helping me to make things better? And I firmly believe that we can make things better. What that looks like and how far that goes, it's completely individual, and it depends on totally on the individual circumstances. These are all the types of things that, you know, you would have really detailed discussions about, to be very clear, or as clear as you can be on that, because then you can determine the practical steps to take each day, the kinds of, I call it a practice, and your practice would include all the skills and strategies and tools that you use on a day-to-day basis, which keep you on a path towards the types of things you want to be doing, or doing more of, or better, or whatever it might be. Your practice keeps you on the path, but life always pushes us off. I often use the sailing boat analogy as well. Not that I sail boats, but it's quite nice, because if you imagine that you're getting on your little sailing boat and you're going to sail to an island over there, and you set the sail and you set your rudder, and off you go. But of course, the wind changes a bit, and the tide and the current changes. So quite soon you're drifting off. Now, if you own, so here's a classic example that you know, exercise is given a lot of bandwidth, isn't it? With this will help you with chronic pain, and it is important. But gosh, it's only one of a zillion different things that you could be doing. And often, well, I do all my exercises in the morning, and then I kind of get on. So I get up, I do my exercises, and then I get on with my life. Now, that's a bit like what I just explained. You get on your boat, you set your sail, you set your rudder, and then off you go. but then the wind changes and you're kind of sailing over here now, but you wanted to go over there. So in fact, staying on the path or staying en route requires us to be tweaking and adjusting. And these are these kind of micro practices that you might have during the day. So it might be movements, it might be breathing, it might be, I mean, whatever. It could be a whole range of different things that individualized to you to stay on that path. Now, the other important insight around that is that, you know, people want results, don't they? They want, well, when am I going to be better? And that's completely understandable. The reality, nobody knows. When are you going to feel better? Nobody knows. I mean, we can make some guesses, some predictions based on what we know, but the person suffering will be making their predictions based on prior expectations. And if they're fairly low, or I'm expecting this to hurt, and they don't even have to be thinking that, by the way, this can be subconscious, then those expectations are playing a really big role in shaping what turns out to happen. The expectation effect is very powerful. And I hasten to add, don't muddle this up. If anyone's ever read The Secret, don't muddle it up with that. Don't read The Secret. The Secret was this book that was written, and lots of people kind of still use, I was trying to think of the...
manifestation, they call it, don't
yeah,
they?
and all that sort of stuff, which basically says that yeah, you've kind of got to be thinking it. You'll get the big house if you keep thinking about it. I didn't get the big house. You weren't thinking about it enough. You know, that kind of thing. Oh. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about that. So, but the expectation effect is a very real effect, and there's lots of science behind that. Lots of really cool studies and things too to show that. There's a very good book on it actually by David Robson, who's a good science writer. I'll share that. I'll share that thing in the, you know, with the links. That was a long answer to your question. I'll shut up now and let someone else.
That's fine. We've got one from Ruth. He says the idea of pain not being maladaptive feels very kind and makes loads of sense. She says, I totally try and live with this idea, but I find it doesn't fit in with many of our societal beliefs, views of pain. How do you think is a good way to get this message across to others, family, friends, work, etc.? As I find no matter how much I say, I don't have anything wrong with me, but I do live with pain, people often treat me in cotton wool and reiterate that I'm maladaptive and have fault.
Yeah. That's I think that's quite a common one, isn't it? So there's quite a lot in that. Actually, I can see the question there, so maybe I could address it bit by bit. Yeah, so I mean, society has strong beliefs, doesn't it? And you can feel sort of at the mercy of that. And actually, on a smaller level, your kind of your local community, so your friends and family, again, they will have their own beliefs. And some people describe how it swings. So one minute they're doing everything for you, next minute they're saying, "Come on, just get on with it. It can't be that bad." You know, those types of things. Pull your socks up. Come on, let's just go and have you tried? You know, all of that stuff. And you know, and I guess that on the whole, people mean well. But there's a kind of a mismatch, really, of what you need, and it requires listening. But you're not always going to get that. So what we're talking about here are things you can control and things you can't control. You can't control other people and what they do, but I think there is something perhaps in how we are that leads others, which is a sort of a double-edged sword in many ways, because again, the onus is sort of on you. But that isn't within your control. So, for example, if someone says to you, "Oh, how are you doing?" and you were to reply, "Oh, you know, things aren't going so well," you know, and you list some things you can't do, which again is entirely understandable sort of response. And of course, the way you describe it is going to be fairly kind of down and that sort of thing. They'll respond to that in different ways. Some might go, "Oh God, I'm out of here." Realistically, it will. Some might just avoid you completely. Some will be like, "Oh no, that's terrible. You know, arm round, come on." So you'll get a whole range of responses. The question is where does that take you? Does that take you anywhere useful? Is it taking you down the path that you want to be on? If you're able to respond in another way, such as, okay, well, look, things aren't great, things are tough, but I'm working on this and that, and I want to do a bit of this, and I'm trying a bit of that. Then generally people are going to go, oh, cool, all right, and maybe it leads to a conversation. Well, maybe I can help you. Maybe we can do a couple of those things together or whatever, and then you've got the option. So kind of you're leading the way really, to an extent, on how people are with you. But I think we always need to remember that we can't control others. If we're trying to control others, then it's forms of manipulation. And again, I think we all do that sort of stuff because we're human. But by and large, I think that or people tell me, and I've worked with people on creating kind of different scripts, not necessarily word for word, but you kind of have different levels of sort of answer and explanation. It might be work colleagues, it might be friends, and then closer friends and such like. But there's no definite answers to this stuff. Each person has to find their own way because you've got your own unique group of people there. Sometimes it does require sitting down and having conversation. Sometimes it's sharing the resources that you've got and explaining to people why and how you're doing things. And then it's up to them, really, as to how far they take it. Now, was there a Liverpool cotton wool? Yeah. Hopefully, does that answer that? Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, you're basically saying it's complicated.
Well, human and human relationships
Always are.
Plus pain or plus depression or plus tiredness, it just becomes harder.
I think this as well goes to something that we all feel when you live with pain, is the loneliness and the isolation that you feel, and you end up feeling you're the only one, which is why things like Footsteps and this is so important, because we can share our experiences, hopefully in a positive sort of moving forward way. But yeah, that is one of the most difficult aspects of this. And also, moving yourself forward when so many people sort of feel like they're trying to pull you back, especially the system, is hard. I mean, it's great if people have access to somebody like you. There's a lot more sort of peer coaches now, so opportunities are arising, but there's still a lot that people have to do themselves, but they can do it, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the shifts, or part of the shift, is to understand that it is an individual responsibility. You're an autonomous being. But still a lot of people will seek the quick fix, and that's understandable. It's very seductive, it's very seductive kind of, and things are offered. Things are out there. Someone tweeted something just before we started this about had I come across this surgical procedure that someone's just talking about, had I heard of it? And I just said, well, I had, but I didn't really know any of the details of exactly what it is. But if you're doing something to the brain, the brain isn't this sort of bunch of discrete modules. It's a very, very complex, looping bunch of processes. If you do something to a part of the brain, okay, you might change the pain experience. Firstly, for how long? What are the effects a year, 2, 5 years down the line? It's very risky doing stuff to brains, and that bit that you're meddling with has many, many roles and integrative roles. So what effects is that going to have? That needs to be really studied and examined and tested in many ways with many people before it becomes a thing. You can't just have someone talking about it and doing it, and that's but that's there's many examples of that. But I can understand why people would jump on it and go, oh great, I'll have some of that.
Well, to be honest, I have a motor cortex stimulator, and I mean, yeah, I regret is a pointless emotion, so I don't sort of, you know, it is what it is, but it's off now, and it didn't really help me, and I found much better ways of helping myself. But one of the weird extra things, motor cortex, I can't read anymore. I can't read books anymore. I mean, that's so completely random, but that's
When you say you can't read books, what, since you had the
yeah.
Did you talk to them about that?
That nobody can talk, no, they don't have any answers for that.
I mean, you might assume that or rather, you know, you sound a bit surprised that the motor cortex would have anything to do with reading.
It was more just that it was just sort of unexpected.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect that, would you?
No,
you wouldn't expect. But of course, you know, to read requires movement.
but I can read on a screen, okay, like this. It's actual books and newspapers and stuff. It's just a bit left field is all. It's just, like I said, it's unintended consequences, and I'm very glad that I don't have the electricity running through my brain anymore, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think that, you know, modern science does some amazing stuff, but the problem we have is that the more you reduce an experience down to a receptor, a little bit of the brain, the further away from the reality you are. Because essentially, you know, the person is embedded within a society, within a culture, within an environment. And this idea of us being discretely separate from those is not accurate. So it's, you know, we can understand things at that level, but we need to bring it out to the bigger picture to really make sense of it. And I think that one of the things that always strikes me, again, you know, hearing people's lived experiences when they, you know, I think a lot about the people that tell me they've got better and what they've done, and you know, to look at what could be useful. And it just seems that you know, one of the biggest pain relievers is by reconnecting with what matters in life and just doing more of that. I know that sounds really simple, and I don't mean it to be simplified, because it sounds simple, but it's not easy. And I'm not, you know, and often I'm aware of this. I'm sort of going through things with someone, and I think, God, I know I'm making it sound like it's really easy. You just do this, you just do that, da, da, da. And I generally don't really tell people what to do anyway. We have a discussion about what's going to be helpful. But I just make that point because, you know, it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge, but it's possible. And it can get easier. That's not easy, but it can get easier because you build the momentum behind what you're doing. They become your habits. They become the things that you do. So bearing that in mind, someone getting more embedded within, you know, a particular community and getting involved and doing stuff, looking after themselves. I mean, that's a big piece of it. Someone, I think Ruth mentioned before about, I can't remember what word she used now, but this sort of tenderness with self, understanding yourself, getting to know the way that you think, looking out for all the hindrances that come about. Again, meditation is very good for that, although I'm not saying meditation is the only way, but it's a great way of waking up to what's really happening so you can make better decisions, to see things more clearly. Because essentially, if we can make better and better decisions when we have these certain insights like impermanence, well, this is how we learn to ease our own suffering. And I know that's very Buddhist in how it sounds, but well, it is. But we can use these principles in a practical way, and I guess I interweave them into the types of conversations that I have.
There's quite a few questions that have popped up. Do you want me to read you one or two? Or
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Well, actually, somebody's asking about that, or more about neuromodulation being pushed on people with CRPS. I think you've probably covered your view on that, but it's interesting to note that that's what's happening.
Yeah, well, I think that nothing should be pushed. It should be a discussion, whatever it is. And I'm not anti most treatment, but I don't think treatment solves the problem, because again, going back to, it's you don't have someone else fix you. Yeah, you're just going to learn to create better conditions to move forward in a better direction. You know, even a surgeon. Well, hold on a minute. I fix bones because I put them together and do. No. You just create the conditions. The person does the healing. Let's get it right. You know, we're guides and encouragers, and we advise, that sort of thing. We don't fix people. That's a nonsense, and it's really arrogant as well. You know, the person does the important stuff, and we're here to help with that process. So nothing should ever be pushed. So if you feel that you're being pushed, then that's perhaps you need to go somewhere else, or just to put a pause on things, and to. But although, it's easy to say, because it can be very intimidating when you've got someone on the other side of the table saying, no, you should do this, you need to do that. That can be tricky. So if you're going to a consultation, then it's good, perhaps to take someone with you who can be an advocate, or who might hear other things that we don't all hear the same things, of course. But there can be a role for some of these things, but that's not the main deal. Anything that's passive, whatever that is, someone doing something to you, is not teaching you how to live, is not teaching you how to relate to difficult situations or challenging situations, or to make best decisions. That comes through, working with someone or working with yourself on different things.
Joe Barry notes that, so moving on from that, is that he finds it interesting hearing you talk about needing a wide and flexible approach to pain management. Often I reflect on the impact that an inflexible clinician may have on a person's pain. I think most of us would say we've been there. We are always trying to fit patients to our models. For example, pain management is very brain-centric currently.
Yeah.
Generally, the target-driven side of healthcare, reducing waiting lists, seeing X amounts of patients in X amount of time, doesn't lend itself to a wider, complex way of thinking. Again, a lot of us have suffered from that. This makes me wonder how much the system is serving people in pain. Do you have any thoughts on this? Going a step further than that, as a society, people seek help with healthcare only to get put back into a society which caused them to seek care in the first place. Any thoughts on societal interventions for pain, and how can healthcare can contribute? That's a massive.
That's quite a big set of questions, Joe. I know. We've chatted on. I think we've chatted on Twitter a few times. I mean, just going back up to, and I think I'll just address each point fairly briefly. I think that'll be the fair way to go about it. But yeah, I sort of made that point that we're in that way of training our healthcare professionals. This is the model. Let's squeeze everyone through it. Doesn't work well. How much more do we need to see people suffering to wake up to that as a society? That brings in the societal bit. There needs to be a big shift on the understanding, the approach, much more about collaboration with people. This is about their lives. We see people, we work with people, then we go home, and that person's then got to know how to live their best life in their world. That's what we're helping them to do in all the different ways. If you're a fly on the wall in my sessions, we talk about all sorts of things. Okay, we do the odd exercise here and there, of course you do, and this, that, and the other. But most of it is utterly geared to whatever that person wants to achieve, and having conversations about that, however abstract that may be. Or we may just end up chatting about something they have a passion for, as a demonstration of the way they can get into a different state without even really realizing it, and how their body then just dissolves into the background for that moment of time, because then they realize they can, by putting their focus on a particular thing and then practicing it. I mean, yeah, the target-driven side of healthcare. I mean, last night I was listening to Keir Starmer on the news talk about their priorities with cancer, heart disease, diabetes. I was very close to tweeting, and chronic pain, which outdoes all of those. So society isn't thinking about it enough. And actually within a lot of those, obviously there's pain as well, heart disease, diabetes, cancer. There's a lot of pain, the chronic pain there as well. So yeah, the way that society thinks is not in line at all with what's most helpful. And still a lot of the messages are very wrong. There's still stuff banging on about posture and, you know, all of these things, not helpful. Is the system serving people in pain? No, as a whole. Are there individual clinicians and therapists doing amazing work with people in pain? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Are there enough of them? No, nowhere near. It's an absolute specialism. There's too many people that have a go. There's too many people that retain patients working with them. You know, I see people, I know people, and I know they're working with people suffering with chronic pain. They don't have the experience, they don't have the qualifications. It's as simple as that. I might sound a bit harsh, and it's an unpopular view, but that's the reality. If you had cancer, you wouldn't go to someone who's got a special interest in cancer or has a go. You know, you go and see the specialist, you go and see that person. So we need more. And it doesn't really matter where, you know, they could be a nurse, they could be a physio, an osteopath, a psychologist. You know, they could come from any different sort of background like that and be really, really helpful because of their understanding, because of their approach, their way of being. All of this interlaces, of course, and the set of tools and things that they offer as practical steps. I think that's probably the key. Oh yeah, the pain brain centric. I think the problem is that there's been so much emphasis in scientific world and in the popular press on brain. We've gone brain mad. Obviously in the pain world, you know, Lorimer Molesley and Dave Butler, the big with the Explain Pain, you know, really good quality work. But we've moved on from that. You know, we can't just be thinking about the brain, and the science is moving on, and the thinking is moving on, and has been for a number of years. So these smaller meetings that I go to, these conferences where the academics and the researchers and the scientists doing this stuff are talking about it. I've been doing that for years now, going and hanging out with these guys to learn, to bring it into what we can do day to day. It's so much about the whole. But there's even resistance within the scientific world, of course. You know, so people saying, no, it's more than that. It's about the whole person, all these different systems. No, it's about the brain. It's about the brain. But that just makes no sense to me anyway. But...
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. I think, was it Sue, somebody who's reminds us that we need to upstream this. You know, the whole enabling people to self-manage better, but also just, you know, some of the social determinants that are slipping people into pain, we need to upstream it. But again, that's a very big topic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's huge. But you know, that kind of the society, the culture, the environment's very important. I mean, for example, if you look at the data, and this is going back a little bit, but I think it's a really good example that obviously there were a large number of American soldiers who became drug addicts while they were in Vietnam. And then when they came back to their kind of normal life, day-to-day life, a number of them then were no longer addicts. There was enough in that updated their system that need was no longer there. There was no longer these errors created being minimized by taking the drug to then feel better. Obviously some didn't, but a number did, which really demonstrates how, you know, you could do have an amazing session with someone, for example, or be working on certain things. But if they then go back into an environment which is very challenging, for whatever reason that might be, then the protective systems can kind of pick up again, because that's what's needed in that environment. That makes sense in that niche, to be in that survival state, which could include pain. So think of someone who gradually over time has sort of retreated. First of all, they stay at home, then they just in the bedroom, and they don't go out of the bedroom. So the bedroom becomes that place of pain. That room is part of that experience. So actually some of the first steps would be to spend some time outside of the room and look at ways of doing that, for example. So the environment's really important.
Yes, thank you. I'm conscious that we've actually run over time, and although this is really interesting, and we've still got some questions. Do people want to do this again? What do you reckon, Richmond?
Well, I'm happy to do it. Yeah, I'm happy to do again, to go again. There's always lots of questions and lots to discuss. So yeah, very, very easy, and very easy to do that.
In that case, I mean, we'll sort something out if people are interested. That would be brilliant. If you guys subscribe to our Eventbrite, then you will get notifications of our events, so you won't miss anything. I'm going to give the last word, I think, to Ruth, who, going back to that it's simple but not easy. She says, it only sounds simple if you are not in pain. I often think that if I didn't have pain, I think, oh, that is easy, I can do that. But pain makes everything very complicated. And I think that that's a truth that we can all stand by. But I'd also say that things can change and things can get better.
Yeah, that I mean, you're talking from first-hand experience, and there was something that was said earlier that made me think about the importance of you and Louise and others who speak up and share, and now have the opportunity to do that at various conferences and things. That was always the missing piece, you know, people sitting in a room almost talking about you all without inviting you in. I mean, again, it's so arrogant, isn't it? We can do all this. Well, how about asking the people if they want that? So again, it's representative of how it all is, and that's got to be the shift. And you guys are playing such a big role in that, which is great. But just to say to people, if they on social media, I'm always putting stuff out on this, and I've got this book coming out. I was playing with the art. I've got new art ideas to share with you too, actually, on the cover. So that's coming out. But yeah, on my Instagram, which is Pain Coach, Twitter is Pain Physio. You find me on LinkedIn and Facebook as well if you want. But those two, I'm always sort of putting stuff out there, you know, around this. I'm doing a run in a couple of weeks for medical aid for Palestinians. So I do some humanitarian work. I've been out in Gaza teaching on chronic pain and working with people out there with their patients, people who are patients. I like to add that bit. So they're doing amazing work, making sure that they're getting the supplies they need and the training out there, because as you may know, there's a lot of restrictions, a lot of trouble in the area, has been for many years. So MAP do amazing work. I've been privileged to be involved in that. So I'm doing a 65k run along the Thames on the 4th of June. 65k because that's the length of the wall around Gaza. But they wouldn't let me do it there for obvious reasons. So I'm just going to do it along the Thames. So, but if you want to sponsor me, or MAP, that would be great. You'll find the link on, I think the link's on here. Yeah, and anything you can spare would be much appreciated. So thank you.
Yeah, the link's in the chat, and it's on the website too. And if you send me the predictive processing links, I'll send it on to everybody, and the recording once I've got it on the thing. So yeah, I'd just like to say thank you so much. That's been really fascinating, and thank you so much for doing it, and thank everybody for coming. And
yeah, good to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.